What is up, guys, and welcome back to another episode of the Life's a Dance podcast. I am your gracious host, Trey Culata. Thank you, as always, for joining me on this beautiful journey through life and discovery, because we are here to figure out how to live our most authentic lives, be our most authentic selves, and live up to our fullest potential. So, again, thanks for joining me. Today's episode, I think, is going to be really eye-opening because throughout the month of March, or the rest of the month of March, we only have a week left, we're going to be discussing different aspects of our money mindsets and how we can reprogram our money mindset to be one of abundance versus scarcity and lack and resistance. Because unfortunately, for most of us, we have been programmed to believe that money is, it's a dirty word and it's kind of got a bad connotation. Even though we all want more of it, it almost has like this underlying like emotional attachment to like greed and things of that nature. And it's hard to acquire and it's tight and you got to work hard. So today we are covering our money stories, the internal stories that we have been programmed to believe about money, why it's important to understand your story around money, where they come from. I'm going to get into a couple of examples just to kind of, help you grease the wheels here to figure out how we can get to the root cause of where our true beliefs and habits about money come about, and figuring out how we use that story to then rewrite the story so that we can create new habits and new beliefs that are more loving and supportive of abundance and financial security and success. So let's get started. Okay. I feel like really with money mindset, I just got back from a physical therapy session and I'm thinking to myself, and this is the way I want you to think about this conversation. This is something that you have to start implementing, not just once. You can't just go to physical therapy once and expect to be healed, right? You have to go, right now I'm scheduled to go twice a week for the next month, and then we're going to reevaluate from there. So I'm going to challenge you to do this, practice these little mental exercises that we're going to cover once a day, because it's going to come up. I know and we'll get into what I mean by it's going to come up here in a second. But when we're trying to rewire our programming, because a lot of our habits around money have been and stories around money have been deeply ingrained in our emotions and our psyche and our physical bodies for decades. So unwiring these things takes time, and you have to be patient with yourself, but it takes practice and consistency. So let's commit to, after learning about some of these principles, actually implementing them once a day, okay? A mental note, at least once a day, thinking about it, or when it comes up, trying to be aware and mentally rewrite. So let's get into it. So where do our stories around money come from? Well, if you listen to any of the previous podcasts from last week, you'll know that they usually come from our parents or whoever raised us, whoever we were around the most as children. So think about, what are your predominant thoughts? Like when the word money comes to mind, what are the predominant thoughts and feelings that you have around that word? Because if I can share my story with you guys, I know in a couple of past episodes I've explained how my mom was an accountant, so she was really tight with the money. She saved a lot, and she was almost kind of greedy and a hoarder. And even though she had a lot of money, she wasn't really quick to share or spend it on things that most of us would, like a vacation or going out to restaurants. It was always just save, save, save. And she was always really scared about losing her money. And she did actually go through an experience where she lost all of her money and had to rebuild when she was middle-aged. And so it's not like the beliefs came from nowhere. And then if you think back even farther, her parents' generation, going through the Depression and just being raised in an environment herself where money was scarce, right? So those beliefs got passed down to her and my dad, and then they, percolate on through the family tree to now our generation, and now my kids. So I want you to think about, how did your parents talk about money? Was there a lot of arguing? Were they savers? Were they givers? Because some people don't have a bad story when it comes to money. Some people have a very good relationship with money. So for instance, there's a book called Rich Dad, Poor Dad, which a lot of people that are in the personal development space will reference. If you have not read it, I highly recommend it. It's one of like the pillars of self-development by this man by the name of Robert Kiyosaki. And he literally had two quote unquote father figures. So his real dad was a professor and had this mindset around money where everything, you had to work hard, you had to put in your time, everything was scarce, 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 never enough, versus his rich dad, which was his friend's dad, who figured out how to leverage money in order to create more wealth. So it was, again, going back to the previous episode, like learning how to respect the energy of money so that it's not about hoarding it and saving it and worrying about losing it. It's like it's using it in the right ways to create more wealth and time and freedom of time and experience, for yourself. Two very different mindsets coming from, I believe, when he started working with his mentor, who's the second dad in the book. I think it was somewhere in the 50s or 60s. So, this was a long time ago. And yet we still have two examples of grown men from the same time period, one having a scarcity mindset and one having an abundance mindset, using money as a tool. Okay. So this is very possible for anybody willing to do the work. And luckily, I'm here to share with you some tips on how to get started. So with my money story, which, again, I got from my mom, save, 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 don't spend, don't blah, 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 always be worried about, losing the money. And my husband, he has, a similar but different story. I feel like his story, if I had to venture to guess, this is a very educated guess. So babe, if you're listening, correct me if I'm wrong. But his family grew up pretty poor. And so it was like, just kind of barely making ends meet. And it was always a struggle and always a, paycheck to paycheck kind of scenario. So he grew up thinking that you really got to work hard. You have to work paycheck to paycheck. That's the only thing. There's nothing really above and beyond this, basically a life of servitude your whole life. And then you might have a little extra money at the end of the week for some beers on a Saturday night. And that was it. And nothing could be farther from the truth. But that's what he saw. That is what he grew up around. So his story around money is that it's difficult. There's not, there's usually enough to make ends meet and that's it, right? If you work hard. And again, not very accurate, as we can see from a lot of examples out there in the world today. Just turn on the news and, whatever. So why is it important that we understand our stories around money? Because it's important because we have to, if you want to pull something out by the root, you got to get to the root cause. And the root cause is that we have been believing these stories for so long. And I had a personal example the other day where I was in the car with my kids and I realized that because their dad doesn't help me with anything financially. And, like child support or extracurricular activities. And it's expensive. Having kids is friggin' expensive. And for the longest time, they would ask me for certain things. And right now, I too am on a budget because all of my money is tied up in this development project, which is kind of cool to say. I feel so important. Like, oh my gosh, I'm developing a piece of land, guys. Like, trust me, I never would have thought that I would be in the space. If you had asked me 5 years ago, I would have told you were crazy. But anyway, so all my money's a little tied up right now and things are a little bit tight. I know everybody's feeling it, right? So the girls ask me for certain things and I'm like, and it used to be this kind of canned response of, well, when your dad starts helping me, or not unless your dad starts helping me with child support and extracurricular activities, helping me pay for these things. And not that I try to put that burden on them, but I try to make them understand the fact that I'm not made of money, at least not yet. So, but then I realized I'm like, I am giving these girls the wrong belief system around money, because there is nothing worse than having to sit there and say, I can't afford it. Even just the energy around that, when we say that out loud, it's like, if that's the energy you're putting out, that's the energy you're going to get back. And that is what we are trying to avoid. We are trying to rework our minds to where we are open to the possibilities that exist as far as financially, creating abundance. So I sat down with myself and I said, what is another way that I can think about this, that I can instill the belief system that I want them to have around money? And the first thing that came to mind for me was, I will find a way. Because if nothing else, history, my own personal history has proven that I will always find a way. So fast forward to, another ride in the car with the kids. And I'm like, girls, I want to tell you something that's really important. And they get quiet. And I'm like, I have been saying for the longest time that I can't do certain things with you girls because of money that I need from your dad, and that we might not be able to do extracurriculars forever because I need help from your dad. And I'm here to tell you right now that that's not true. And I'm not going to talk like that anymore, because what I want you to know is that no matter what, I'm going to find a way to make it happen for you girls. And I think that was a very important conversation and a very important way to reframe that mindset, that repetitive thought in my brain, because I am bitter about the fact that he doesn't help me and the financial burden goes to me and my new husband. But at the end of the day, am I going to let that control me? Am I going to let that be the predominant way that I think about money? No, because it's toxic and it's poison. And the first step in, just like addiction, right? In admitting that you have the addiction. So I had the addiction to this story that, well, he owes me and I need help from him. And unless, blah, 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 blah. He owes me. And it's like, fuck that. I don't care if he owes me. I'm going to go on living my life and building a beautiful, life for myself and my kids, regardless of whether or not he gives me a penny. And if he does give me a penny, well, maybe we'll go for ice cream or something. But I'm going to find a way. So what is that story for you? What are the things that we need to be reframing? Our predominant thoughts and stories that we are telling ourselves about money. Is it that you have to work hard for money? Is it that, money is scarce? Is it that, you can't do this unless somebody else helps you? I mean, whatever that is for you, that's the thing. You have to really sit down and think about, how did your parents handle money? And then once you figure that out, it's like, okay, well, then what did I see them do with money, and what emotions, does that bring up for me? And what is the predominant thought that I have when it comes to money? Because a lot of times we feel like there's friction, you got to grind, there's friction, you got to work overtime or whatever. Let's reframe that. So for me, right, I took that story of we can't continue to do these things unless so-and-so helps me. And I turned that and I flipped it on its head and I said, fuck that. I'll find a way. And maybe it's, I don't know. It's hard for me to give an example without knowing what your specific story is. So if once you figure that out, why don't you share it with me in the comments below and we can work through it? because I feel like our words matter and the way that we talk to ourselves matter, and it affects the way our beliefs and our habits around money. And the first step in figuring out how to create and be open to more abundance is changing our mindsets about how we think about money. Is it a commodity that's scarce and that we need to be, squirreling away constantly? Or is it something that we can create? And I think the faster we can get into really believe the idea that it's something that can be created, the better off all of us will be. Because all too often we just believe the opposite. And it just takes practice. When you notice yourself feeling like that story is popping back up for you and you feel like you got to fight for the money, it's like, all right, how do we flip that on its head? You can say, I'm a powerful being of creation and I can create money. I will find a way. Figure out something that works for you. But you have to start with that original story and then kind of deconstruct it and reverse engineer it. So an awareness is a big part of it. It's a huge part of it because it creeps up sometimes without us. We're so addicted to that physical feeling in our bodies that we're so used to whenever we think about money or working or whatever project we're working on, that we, attach to it and we don't even realize that it's happening. So this is going to allow us to release those things and rethink them, because now once you have, it's just like in sales, they taught us these canned responses, right? To people that gave us objections. And this is what you need. You need a canned response to any time you feel that old story creeping up in your head. So whenever that old story of I need my ex-husband to help me, otherwise blah, 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 and F him, it now changes to I got this. I'll figure out a way. I don't need his ass. And that's so much more empowering. And think about when you put that energy of empowerment out into the universe, the synchronicities start happening and the money starts flowing. But you have to start, like I just got the tinglies just thinking about it. So I must be on the right track here, guys. And I want you to get on the right track in terms of your money mindset. Again, it's like physical therapy. It's mental money mindset therapy. Get to the root. Figure out what your story is about money. Where did it come from? And let's reverse engineer it into something positive. Okay? That's it for today, guys. I know I went a little bit longer than I usually do, but I mean, you guys are worth it. I love you all. If you have any questions whatsoever or, want to share your money story with me, that would be great. I would love to help kind of reverse engineer how we can make this a positive and empowering exercise for you. Okay? I love you all. Until next time, let's dance.